The first snow of the season came early to the town of Riverbrook. It fell slowly, gently, covering everything in a soft, white silence. The streets were quiet, the trees bare, and smoke drifted from the chimneys of small, neat houses. Families stayed inside, warming themselves by fires, preparing for the coming holiday. But in one house, behind thick curtains and drawn blinds, a different kind of silence took over, a silence that was not peaceful, but heavy with fear. The Watson family lived at the end of a cul-de-sac in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by woods. Henry Watson, a mechanic, lived with his wife, Elise, and their two daughters, 14-year-old Mia and 7-year-old Lila. They were not rich, but they were close. Henry worked long hours, and Elise taught piano lessons from home. Their girls were happy and playful, often seen riding bikes or playing hide-and-seek in the yard. The day before Christmas Eve, they invited their closest friends, the Porters, over for dinner. Greg and Naomi Porter were kind people who lived just down the street, and their son, Dylan, was Lila's best friend. The families had shared holidays together for years. After dinner, the adults talked and drank coffee while the children ran off to play. Around 7, the 3 kids asked to go to Mia's treehouse at the back of the Watson property. The parents, trusting and distracted, agreed. They didn't come back. At first, no one panicked. Elise called for them, assuming they had lost track of time. Henry went out with a flashlight. But the treehouse was empty. The yard was empty. The forest behind the house, silent and dark, gave no clue. Within an hour, the police were called. Officers searched the woods. Neighbors joined in. Flashlights lit up the trees like stars fallen to the earth. Dogs were brought in. A helicopter circled above. But the children were gone. Only one clue was found. A red scarf caught on a low branch, the kind Lila always wore. As the hours stretched into the next day, the town changed. Holiday decorations suddenly seemed out of place. Christmas lights blinked on houses where no one felt like celebrating anymore. Flyers with the children's faces went up on telephone poles. Henry and Elise barely spoke. Naomi cried all the time. Greg wandered the streets, as if trying to find his son by sheer will. Detective Nora Hall was put in charge of the case. She was known for her attention to detail and quiet strength. She interviewed the families again and again. She asked about strangers, delivery men, strange cars. The only odd thing anyone remembered was an old green truck that had been parked near the woods for a few days earlier that week, but it had vanished. Days passed. Christmas came and went without a sound. No presents were opened. No laughter returned to the Watson or Porter homes. Elise stopped eating. Henry stopped shaving. The only thing they cared about was finding their daughters. Then, one evening, the police arrested someone. It was a man named Arlen. He lived in a trailer 2 towns over. A neighbor had reported screams coming from his property. When police arrived, they found no children, but they did find clothing, a jacket that matched one Dylan had worn the night he disappeared. Arlen was strange and quiet. He spoke slowly like a child. He had a long criminal record, though nothing related to children. Still, it was enough to hold him. Henry was sure this was the man. But after hours of questioning, Arlen said nothing useful. He denied everything. The evidence was weak. The jacket wasn't confirmed to be Dylan's. After 2 days, the police let him go. Henry couldn't accept that. The night Arlen was released, Henry followed him. He waited until dark, then pulled up in his truck and forced Arlen inside. No one saw him. He took him to an old storage shed near the edge of town, a place he had once used for fixing up junk cars. There, he locked Arlen in a back room and demanded answers. But Arlen said nothing. Days turned into weeks. Henry brought him food and water, but also pain. He hit him, screamed at him, begged him. But Arlen kept silent. His face bruised, his eyes empty. He seemed more afraid than guilty. Back at home, Elise suspected something. Henry came home late, dirty, with a hollow look in his eyes. He said he was working on a car, but she didn't believe him. When she finally followed him one night, she discovered the truth. Instead of stopping him, she helped. She believed that if this man knew anything about Lila, they had a right to get it from him. Pain, after all, was nothing compared to the thought of their daughter dying alone in the cold. Detective Hall noticed the change in the Watsons. They seemed more distant, more on edge. She followed her instincts. She started watching Henry. Meanwhile, the case was going nowhere. No new clues. No new sightings. The snow covered everything, even hope. Then something happened. A woman came into the station. She was trembling, pale, barely able to speak. She said she had seen something strange. Her name was Clara, and she lived in a house near the woods, not far from the Watsons. One night, a week after the children went missing, she had seen lights in the forest. She thought it was kids playing. But then she saw someone, a tall man dragging something wrapped in a blanket. She hadn't reported it sooner because she was scared. But the guilt was too much to bear. Detective Hall went to investigate. In the woods behind Clara's house, buried under snow, they found a small underground storm shelter, barely big enough for one adult to lie down in. Inside were old blankets, candy wrappers, a small flashlight, and a toy that belonged to Dylan. They had been there, but they weren't anymore. Hall searched the area and found faint tire tracks. With some effort, the police traced them to a cabin deep in the woods, on private land that hadn't been visited in years. Inside, they found more clues, drawings on the walls, children's books, and fingerprints. DNA tests later confirmed that both Lila and Dylan had been there, but there was no sign of them now. Hall started to form a new theory. What if Arlen had nothing to do with this? What if he had simply stumbled onto something or someone else's hideout? She began re-examining everything. She looked again at the files of past missing children. She found a pattern. Over the past 15 years, 3 children had vanished near Riverbrook, each one from a neighborhood close to the woods. Each time, the case had gone cold. No connections had ever been made. But Hall noticed something strange. All 3 families had been visited by a mobile animal clinic that traveled from town to town. One name came up in all 3 visits, a nurse named Edith. Edith had no criminal record. She was older now, retired, living in a small house on the edge of town. When Hall paid her a visit, Edith was kind but nervous. She claimed to barely remember her past patients. Her house was tidy, her garden neat. Nothing seemed out of place. But something about the house felt wrong. As Hall looked around, she noticed an old shed in the backyard, locked from the outside. Edith claimed it was for tools. When Hall asked to see inside, Edith refused. That was enough to get a warrant. The next day, police came back and broke open the shed. Inside, they found a hidden trapdoor leading underground. What they found there changed everything. It was a large underground room, dark, damp, and cold. Inside were Lila and Dylan. They were alive, scared, and weak, but alive. There were blankets, food, toys, and even a radio. Edith had been keeping them there, hidden from the world. When asked why, she said something about protecting them and saving them from the world's evil. She spoke in circles, clearly disturbed. Later, doctors confirmed she suffered from a mental illness that made her believe she was saving the children, not harming them. Edith was arrested. Lila and Dylan were reunited with their families. There were tears, endless tears. Naomi collapsed when she saw her son again. Elise held Lila so tightly she could barely breathe. The town breathed again. But one person wasn't there to celebrate. Henry was missing. Detective Hall, remembering her suspicions, followed the trail. Eventually, she found the shed where Arlen had been held. The room was empty. Arlen was gone. In the corner, there were signs of a struggle and blood. A second door had been broken open from the inside. Henry had taken a man he believed to be guilty, and now that man had escaped. Or worse, they searched for weeks but found nothing. Henry never returned home. Months passed. Spring came, and the snow melted. The trees turned green again. Children played outside once more. Lila started school again. Dylan began talking about the stars. The town tried to heal. Then, one afternoon, a park ranger found something in the woods, a shallow grave covered in branches and rocks. Inside was a man's body. It was Arlen. Nearby, buried deeper, they found another body. It was Henry. No one could say what happened for sure. Maybe Henry had tried to move Arlen and Arlen fought back. Maybe they struggled and killed each other. Maybe it was revenge. Maybe it was justice. Elise, upon hearing the news, cried for days. Not just from grief, but from guilt. She had followed her husband into darkness, believing it would lead to light. Detective Hall never closed the case completely. There were too many unanswered questions. But she wrote in her report that Henry Watson had died trying to find his daughter, and he succeeded. In the end, his love had driven him to the edge of morality, to the edge of sanity, but it was love all the same. Lila never forgot her father. She wore his old jacket to school, even when it was too big. Every year, on the first snow of winter, she sat by the window and looked out into the white silence, remembering the man who had searched through every shadow to bring her home. And in the quiet town of Riverbrook, under gray skies and tall trees, the wind carried a story, not just of pain, but of sacrifice. Not just of fear, but of the strength it takes to love someone enough to break.